the opportunity gap helps us to understand the unevenness in different opportunities that one group has over the other, as opposed to looking at this output in terms of achievement indicators. So if we think about opportunity, we can think about that as an input. So if you have access to more high quality instruction, if you have a better and more supportive learning environment, when you have a well-rounded education that inspires success, when you have educators that are compassionate and are able to motivate you to do your best. So all of these are opportunities. And when we see unevenness in opportunities in the input, then we might see unevenness in the outcomes. So that's why opportunity gaps is more important, because it doesn't really matter what you see in terms of the outcome if you don't know what the process is by which that happened. And so the assumption that we make when we see achievement gap is that the group on the bottom needs to change something in order to be successful. The assumption that we make when we look at the opportunity gap is that if we had equal resources, then we may have more similar outcomes.
So I'd like to push back a little bit on this particular question, because I think the opportunity gap gets us into the same trap as the phrasing achievement gap. So achievement gap has been criticized by a number of folks, including Gloria Ladson-Billings, for putting the focus too much on our individual students and saying that they are the problem or their parents are the problem, and we need to fix these individuals in order to close these gaps. The opportunity gap tries to control for that by saying, well, it's not the student's fault or the parents' fault that they're born the race that they are, or that they're born into the socioeconomics that they are. These things are arbitrary. And I want to push back on that and say these things are not arbitrary. They're actually systematized into particularly our country, or in the US and other countries as well, as to why someone born of a certain race is in the socioeconomic class that they are. Gloria Ladson-Billings' speech is called From Achievement Gap to Education Debt. And what I think is so important about that speech is that she tries to get us away from this notion of deficit in our students, and tries to get us away from this notion of deficit in the conditions that they grow up in. It's not bad or random that someone is born Black or born Latinx or born into a particular thing. Really, what Gloria Ladson-Billings tries to get us to do is to get us away from this idea of any kind of gap and move us towards what she calls a debt, which is when we look at historically what has happened with our students, when we look at historically the notions of race in a particular country, or historically what has happened with ethnicity in a particular country, what is it that we owe students that they have historically been deprived of? That's a big question, and a lot of people want these quick, simple fixes. But when we look at historically what our students have gone through, you don't fix injustice by merely saying, well, today I'm going to give you access to X. Really, we have to look at the long game. And what I love so much about Gloria Ladson's speech is that when we think about the education debt, she really has that long view of saying, here's some factors that we need to think about. We need to look at these economic factors. We need to look at these sociopolitical factors. We also need to look at these moral factors. What is it that we owe our students? And we may not have been arbiters of that particular injustice, but others have been. And so when we are in a classroom, we really need to be thinking about not just addressing achievement gaps or opportunity gaps, but what we owe to our students and what we owe to one another for the kind of society that we want to create.